Third to last installment here of the top 100 breakdown on the call up. You've got me, Aram, him, Jack, and we've got prospects 40 to 21. You're shaking your head. Is it the second to last?
You're wrong. It's the second to last. It's the penultimate installment of the top 100 countdown.
So it's 40 to 21.
It's 40 to 21, and then we got 20 to 1 later this week, and then we're done.
Okay. I don't know why I thought we were gonna like really just build the suspense and stretch it out.
You were thinking 20 to
I don't want to
11.
do that. I'm okay not doing that, but I don't know why in my head I convinced myself that's what we're doing. So let me scrap that. Penultimate. That's such a broadcaster word, by the way. I don't hear it in any other context other than you play-by-play MFers that use that word.
Okay, so were you listening to the broadcast the other day with Craig Minervini on? I said penultimate time that we're seeing a certain opponent, and I turned to him and I said, it's a word that I've only ever used during a baseball game. Penultimate. I've never heard it in any other setting, and it's this weird broadcaster word, and I would be pissed if I was sitting at home as a fan, like, what does that mean, penultimate? Like, I'd be throwing
flexing on us with your dictionary words.
Yeah, look at you, Mr. SAT guy, whatever. But yeah, no, penultimate is such a funny word because it's only ever used on a baseball broadcast, and that's it.
There's a few of those. Actually, I would love, please respond in the YouTube comments with baseball only broadcast words. I know there's a fair amount of them. I would go through them, but like you have a spring training game to get to in about an hour 20. So we need to get through some good prospects here.
The other one that I'll give you is cotton candy skies. I've never heard a pretty looking sky referred to as cotton candy skies until you play a baseball game at dusk and somebody's on the radio.
That is valid. You mentioned the Marlins radio broadcast, though, and it actually segues us perfect into number 40 here, who is a guy that you guys brought onto the broadcast, Marlins left-handed pitching prospect, Thomas White.
Yeah.
And Thomas White, I mean, this dive was really fun for me when we updated the Marlins system because you saw a pitcher blossom in each start that you watched. And sorry, the screen's going to freak out a little bit until the ads load in if you're watching on YouTube. But I watched him just get more comfortable and more comfortable and more comfortable. And I don't know if he talked about this on the broadcast with you guys, but it's a little bit nitty gritty and specific, but he tweaked his breaking ball to be kind of more natural to how he likes to throw it. And I think just more natural for his arm action. And that really yielded a lot better results as well. We're also talking about a 6'5" lefty here that the command is the one thing to watch. It's not a problem. It's just the difference between him potentially being, the frontline starter that he could be versus just a guy that might be a 4 or a fringe 3. But I think what we're seeing now is there's a high probability of this kid landing as a middle rotation starter because you've got a fastball that looks like there's more velo in there. And he looks like he could touch 97, 98 a lot more consistently, though he's sitting in the mid 90s. You have a changeup that already looks like a plus pitch and a slider that he vastly improved after kind of scrapping the bigger curveball before. And I know that you came away really impressed with the makeup and everything as well.
Yeah, so if you don't think AJ Ramos and I hit on that with Thomas White, you're sorely mistaken. You don't know
insulting.
Fish family.
Sorry.
Listen, it was me and AJ in the booth hanging out with Thomas White. You don't think we're going to get into tweaked breaking balls? He was very transparent about tweaks that he was making there. And it was, overall like, hey, I've added effectively 2 pitches where I've got a 2-seamer that I just added to the fold on top of my 4-seamer, and I've got a sweepier breaking ball to couple with a tight slider. And that creates kind of 2 iterations of the slider, 2 iterations of the fastball, and then you have that 60-grade changeup as well. So instead of a 3-pitch mix, look at it as like, if you consider a 2-seam and a sweeper kind of half pitches, you can look at it as a 4-pitch mix. Or if you consider them full pitches, you can look at it as a 5-pitch mix from this guy. It seems like he's hell-bent on being a frontline starting pitcher. And that is what I took away from the makeup and just our conversation. That was like 10, 15 minutes during a game. And watching him in spring breakout, dude. Also, I had no idea that there were all spring breakout teams. He was second team all spring breakout. Hell of a 2 innings to land you on that list. But no, I thought it was so encouraging. He hit 100.1 in a live AB as soon as he showed up to camp. I'd eliminate this whole tier 1, tier 2 thing when it comes to left-handed pitching prospects. If you thought Schultz and Hagen Smith were tier 1 and White started tier 2, I think you might be mistaken. I think Thomas White's in tier 1 with Schultz and Hagen Smith.
It's pretty much the 1A, 1B, right? And if you're doing it in AA, you're right there with those guys. But in terms of the upside, it's right there. And I mean, when we saw him shift that breaking ball, where I want to say it was right around July, that's where in high A, he just absolutely settled. And you'd be hard pressed to find a more consistent starter down the stretch in all of minor league baseball than Thomas White, where he churned out consecutively until the final outing. So I should have, I always throws a wrench when the last outing disrupts this. But before the last outing, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 consecutive outings of 5 innings, one or less earned runs. I mean, obviously they want to stretch him out more, and they will. But when you're usually going out there with the goal of throwing 5 innings, and for 6, 7 straight outings, you're going 5 innings, a 1-run ball, that's going to be impressive. But then when I look at him, it's a low effort delivery. He's 6'5", 210. I think there's easily, and you talked about it, he already hit 100 in live ABs. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that fastball goes from averaging 95.3, like it averaged this past season, to closer to 96 and change this coming season. And over his final 3 starts, he averaged 96 anyways. So there's more velo there. You mentioned the ability to manipulate multiple pitches here. The changeup is clearly plus. And if there was one area where I would have wanted to see a little bit of an adjustment or tinkering, it's probably the breaking ball. So having 2 iterations of a breaking ball there is great, because even if both are just average or above average, having 2 iterations of that definitely helps. And that the fastball changeup combination is going to be plus.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this guy. And, a lot has been made about him and Noble kind of working in tandem, right? They went to Jupiter together. They went to Beloit together. I do think Thomas White is starting to separate from Noble Mayer, and I think it would be kind of a waste of bullets if he went to Beloit to start this year. I have no idea where he's going to get assigned. I think this guy should be tested as a 21-year-old, newly turned 21-year-old, I think, going to AA. I want to see how he fares against AA pitching. And it's funny. I've been talking to a lot of people around here, and I've been talking to people outside even Marlins camp too. Like Jonathan Mayo, Pipeline, was just here, and he said, I wouldn't be shocked if he made the big leagues this year. And I think you're kind of on that same line of thinking. Yep. If we saw him in September, I don't think my jaw is on the floor.
Not at all. And by the way, he's very 20. He's 20 for pretty much the whole season.
He's very 20. He's aggressively 20 years old.
Till September 29th.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's young, but you wouldn't be able to tell. The command can come along a little bit further. It wasn't a liability, but just consistency-wise, execution-wise, that would put him in, and I think comfortably that tier 1 of left-handed pitching prospects, where there really wouldn't even be much debate.
Yep.
Another guy that could fly up the rankings this year is number 39, Konnor Griffin. And Griffin, we talked about Griffin and Rayner and how they're neck and neck out of the prep ranks when we had the draft. And for me, even in the early going, having limited looks at both, I even maybe leaned a little bit more towards Rayner. But Griffin, and this is the crazy part about how fluid it is when you have prep prospects, Griffin's body is, and we were talking about this actually in the Discord. Somebody sent like a side-by-side of his swing mechanics too, of him in the batting cage, but his body is completely different too. He put on like 10, 15 pounds. He adjusted his swing mechanics, and he still is a 70 runner. I love that the Pirates are putting him in center field, because we've talked about it. Above average shortstop or elite center fielder. Give me the elite center fielder, and that's what I think he can be. I didn't get to see him do a ton in the spring breakout game, but just watching him move was impressive. The ground that he covers in center field, he glides out there. He's going to be a phenomenal defender there. He has a rocket for an arm because he was a legitimate pitching prospect. The power is going to be immense because he's added this strength. He's already huge, and the swing mechanics are better. So the biggest concern was the hit tool. We still need to see it, and we still need to see him do it in a regular season. But I am much less concerned just seeing what he was able to do before even facing adversity, saying, you know what? My mechanics probably aren't exactly where I need them to be. I'm going to proactively adjust these. For the most part, guys that have never faced any adversity, I don't expect them to make those changes. Yeah. Why would you? to be this proactive and be able to make those adjustments already tells me a lot about how hitterish he may actually be.
He had to be one of the biggest risers. I don't have the list of like spots risen in the top 100 based on the end of season 24. Like, I mean, I feel like you needed to see a swing change and then he was going to skyrocket. And he's already skyrocketing. Like he was in what, the 70s or 80s or something?
Probably like the 60s.
Okay, but like the 60s to 39 in an off season, like that tells you all you got to know about an off season adjustment. And the P word is my favorite word in baseball, proactive. Like he is as like if he's proactive and he's getting out in front of forecasted struggles, who knows how this guy's going to react to struggles? Like he's going to kick it into hyperdrive to make sure that he snaps out of that. Of course, he's going to go through a little bit of a slump. He is a 30 hit tool right now, but he's also 18, 19 years old, and he's going to go to low A, and he's going to make his affiliate debut this year. There hasn't been a low A guy that has stuck out more in spring training than Konnor Griffin. I think a lot of people were expecting Wetherholt to be that guy, but Konnor Griffin's the headline stealer.
Yeah, everyone wants to talk about Lombard as well, and I get it. He's a guy that just missed the top 100, but I wanted to see a little bit more other than a few good swings and those mechanical changes.
Yeah, but that swing was great.
Because, with Griffin, we can see we're seeing the athleticism, the speed, the way he's moving, the body shift. It's pretty remarkable on top of the mechanical adjustments. So, I mean, with it all working with Griffin, he's a potential 5-tool superstar. And if the hit tool pushes closer to average, I mean, the ceiling is going to be shockingly high. And he has the upside to be, if you ask me who's somebody outside the top 30 that wouldn't surprise you by 2026 is a top 3 or maybe a number 1 overall prospect candidate, Griffin has the upside to be that. We just have to wait and see if he can hit enough. And by the way, because the Mayer Lawlar thing in tandem, it's probably going to be a little bit of that with Griffin and Rayner. Finally got to see Rayner in spring breakout. His swing looked fantastic. Cool. That's a quick bat, and he uses his lower half. These guys both might just be great, and it's you love seeing that out of the prep guys right away to be a little bit more polished maybe than people were expecting.
Yep.
38. Speaking of Lawlar, that's where he checks in. Difficult player to rank at this point. I think when you look at Lawlar, the value comes from the glove and the speed. He has been productive through the minor leagues, but he is an outslug the EVs guy, meaning he's going to pull the ball in the air at a pretty high clip, but his exit velocities are not going to be great. Yeah. And what I'm a little concerned about, and this is relative concern, right? He's a top 40 prospect, is the hit tool is average at best. So you have average at best hit tool, probably average power. That works well if you have above average plate discipline and you're an above average shortstop and the wheels that he has. But that means that he's got to tap into the top of his ability kind of across the board. Yeah. I think he can do that, but being healthy is going to be a big part of that.
2024 was really tough because we were waiting to see what that would look like from Jordan Lawlar off of big league struggles. And it was 23 games, 11 of which being a rehab assignment. 12 games in Reno. He was awesome in his 12 games in Reno. He had 18 hits in 12 games and 6 extra base hits in 12 games. Then he goes and makes up for lost time, or at least tries to, with 108 plate appearances in the Dominican Winter League. Like, that's as heavy a workload as you will see in the Dominican Winter League from an American player. And he struggled, man. Like, he hit under 240. He had an OPS at 670. You want to see that be better from a guy that is pretty much a big leaguer at this point. He's had a good spring. And what's the conversation we've had with Lawlar forever? It's like, if you make a war bet, speed and defense is going to elevate him. But at a certain point, you got to hit. And I don't know if Arizona's banking on that this year. It stunk to see the Perdomo extension from a Lawlar perspective. I thought it was the right baseball move for Mike Hazen in Arizona. But in terms of your top prospect, like that just kind of signaled to me that a lot of Lawlar is unknown to even the Arizona Diamondbacks.
For sure. And I think it helps that, Gino Suarez is going to hit free agency and you can ultimately slot Lawlar in the third. But I do agree with you that Perdomo extension was a hey, we're still hoping Lawlar can be great and we like him, but we can't bank on that as a team that, I mean, if the Diamondbacks are not looking at the World Series each year now over the last 2 years and now moving forward, I have a total wrong read. I'd imagine that they are envisioning themselves as World Series contenders. You cannot bank on a prospect that just hasn't been available and had some growing pains at the big league level to be your shortstop. It's a guy that you could bank on competing for the opening at third base when Gino Suarez is gone. Yeah. But I do agree with the move of adding Perdomo. But when Lawlar was a consensus top 10 prospect, maybe they don't do that. Extending Perdomo, I do think, is a sign of maybe just a little bit of doubt around what Lawlar will ultimately be able to do.
I think they took a page out of Atlanta's book when they extended Orlando Arcia on that like super cheap deal. It was a 2-3 year deal, but they didn't know what they had with Vaughn Grissom, and they wrote a hot hand, and Grissom like helped get them to the postseason. Like Grissom was good when he came up for Albies, but were you going to bank on Vaughn Grissom being the shortstop and learning shortstop? Like, no, they extended Arcia, and Arcia looked good. So I don't know. It felt a lot like that where they have their backup plan. It was relatively cheap, but the backup plan might be option A, and you hope that the prospect blossoms.
Yep. I was thinking about a comparison here, and tell me if you think this would be disappointing. It's not. There's not really a direct Lawlar comparison, I feel like, in the majors right now. Closest. If he was Ha-Seong Kim, how would you feel?
I'd be fine with it personally. I think Diamondbacks fans would be pretty disappointed.
I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine that the Diamondbacks would be pretty happy with that. And that's sometimes how the public versus industry feelings on a player. And we just talk about this. That's kind of the theme of some of these top 100 episodes is maybe we're not fair to these players. I do think Lawlar just being one of the top prep guys, the way that he sprints it out after getting hurt, but with the way he sprints it out of the gate when we finally saw him in game action and everything that he's done and just how electrifying he can be, that raised the ceiling a little bit. Yeah. But I do think that this is a guy that was just more ahead of his peers and is a good player. If it's average hit, fringe average power, above average defense at short, and good wheels and good plate discipline, that is Ha-Seong Kimish, and that's a good player. That it's ironically Kim a little banged up last year too, shoulder thing as well. But that is kind of the comp I see, which is no doubt a top 40 prospect, but that may not be what everybody was ultimately hoping for.
Yeah.
37, Jarlin Susana. This is just such a funny range where the players are just so distinctly different.
Yes.
But Susana, man, he climbed a good bit too. I don't know what the exact numbers are on that, but I mean, the Nationals, somebody asked in the Discord as well, how would you assess the Soto trade? I love how it had to be specified, the first Soto trade. Where like is it as good of a return as I think it is essentially? And so, yeah, I mean, as far as trading future Hall of Famers goes, like which generally is going to backfire on you, this is about as good as it can go. And Susana feels like house money. James Wood already looks like it's going to make it a win. Gore just being a big league starter in any capacity. If Gore doesn't improve at all, him with James Wood makes it a relative win because most teams are just not going to recoup. Of course, Soto is way better, but you don't usually recoup two talents like that with full team control and everything. Abrams as well.
You're not. Yeah, I was going to say you didn't mention the all-star shortstop.
Exactly, and he's an unfinished product. But even if he stalls out, those are three solid players for you. But Susana feels like house money, and he may end up being as valuable as anybody not named James Wood in this conversation. Of course, Gore is way further along, but look at the measurables here. Look at the pitch grades. I got a 70 on the heater. You could argue that it's encroaching on 80, 70 on the slider, and an above average curveball and a changeup that he mixes in. That's not a bad offering at all. It's really all about the command and if assuming durability as well. I mean, this guy could be another dude for them.
Susana. Okay. So I was actually going to mention like the one guy that we haven't debriefed in that Soto deal is having an awesome spring training, by the way. Robert Hassel III actually looks like a fourth outfielder.
He's the true house money.
Yeah. Like he's totally like, if this works, I mean, we might've not won, but think about what San Diego got from Soto to this point. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I mean, King obviously is the ripple from that Soto deal, but they didn't win a World Series. They didn't get to the World Series with Juan Soto. And if they have a fourth outfielder in Hassel, an all-star shortstop in Abrams occasionally, I'm thinking, 1 or 2 all-star games. He made one last year. A 2-starter in Gore, a possible perennial all-star in James Wood, and this guy who could be a mid-rotation arm in Jarlin Susana. Like, wow, man. He's 5 days shy of his 21st birthday. And you mentioned command is everything. He was much, much better when he got to high A. Like in low A, he walked 30 and 56 and a third. Then he goes 47 and a third in Wilmington. He walks 18. So the walks per 9 went from 4.8 to 3.4. Like he just got better. So we'll see what he looks like in Harrisburg this year. He's really young. He's got a lot of time to blossom in Harrisburg. But if he's walking 3.5 per 9 in Harrisburg and he's filling up the zone with this hard stuff and the really good fastball slider combo, why can't he be a 3-starter?
Well, what I love is the ability to get ground balls is how you erase those hitters' counts a little bit more effectively. You can get away with falling behind when you have a 101 mile per hour bowling ball and a disgusting slider than most other pitchers. And this stat just really, I think, hammers it home. He was the only pitcher in minor league baseball, minimum 70 innings last year, with a strikeout rate above 35% and a ground ball rate above 50%. His ground ball rate was 60%. So he had a 10% ground ball rate buffer and a threshold that he was in his own on. That's insane to me. So that's with him still honing in on the command a little bit more and getting to a point where he's filling up the zone with a bit more consistency. But you mentioned it getting better and better. Over his final dozen starts, he walked 8% of batters, struck out 38%. That's a 30% K minus BV rate. Like, that is absurd. Four-seamer averaged 99.8. Sinker averages 98.9. So it's a tick slower and heavier, so you get a lot more ground balls. The ground ball rate on his sinker was 82%.
That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
You can't get on top of that thing. It's not possible.
And trivia for you.
Or under that thing, I should say.
You said 60% ground ball rate last year in the minor leagues?
Yep.
It's different because you're facing big league hitters, but how many pitchers in Major League Baseball, qualified starters, how many qualified starters in Major League Baseball had a ground ball rate at 60% last year?
I'd venture to say none.
It was one. It was Fromber. How many had a ground ball rate over 50%?
6.
6, exactly. Fromber Valdez, Max Fried, Christopher Sanchez, Logan Webb, Tanner Houck, Brian Bayo. Like, that's elite company.
And then if you can get the whiffs too, man. So
I'm
excited about him. By the way,
conversation there. If you're combining whiff and ground ball,
yep. Opponents 440 OPS against his slider as well. I mean, that's a plus potential pitch too. So Susana could be a monster. He'll be 21 years old for the entirety of this season. 36, Kristian Campbell.
Why do you hate him?
He shouldn't even be on the list, right? He's not in the top 10. I don't see anything. 36 means, listen to how we just gushed about 37. I just want to highlight that first. This is, and we've talked about this a lot, the subjective versus objective conversation here, where Campbell, the objective side is the numbers. And the numbers were as good as just about anybody in the minor leagues. And even the batted ball data was as good as just about anybody in the minor leagues. The subjective part is the swing mechanics and whether it looks like that can actually translate. And I think it can translate to big league success. That's why he's the 36th ranked prospect. I don't think it will translate to all-star success, consistent all-star success, which is why he's the 36th ranked prospect. Things that you can get away with in the minor leagues sometimes really catch up to you in the major leagues. And specifically with his swing, and it's very erratic, high effort, and unorthodox. He is a unbelievably twitchy athlete, which is why he's able to get away with it. And he can get away with it at the major leagues to an extent. But hands kind of get dropped down behind him. Body leads the swing. Front side starts to peel open, and then the hands lag behind. Most hitters, the barrel would completely drag, but he's so rotationally explosive His hands are so quick and he's so twitchy that he still generates a ton of force from there. But when the fastballs are running in on you, or just a nasty right on right changeup or split or whatever, and it's further in than you were expecting, or even just a late breaking pitch, you're committing to the swing with your body, and it's almost impossible to shut it down. So your hands are going to get tied up. And I have a lot of videos of that where I've been able to highlight that and kind of show where running sinkers in on his hands resulted in challenges and difficulties and things like that. But that's going to be the scouting report on him, and it'll be the challenge. I think it's part of the reason why he's had some challenges through spring training so far. That said, he's so quick, he's so powerful. He'll be able to crush stuff middle away, crush mistakes, and he can make a living off of that. But I do think mechanically, he is – you can game plan for him a little bit more. And I think at high A, double A, triple A, especially with how quickly he's moving through the ranks, pitchers are just working on what they're working on.
For sure. They're
going to start targeting you in a more specific way, and I think it's going to be more challenging in that regard. But 90th percentile exit velocity of 106 miles per hour, lower chase rates, which hedges some of that concern. He's going to get his. It's just how consistently.
So as weird as it sounds, he wasn't a guy to start 2024, and he is a guy now to start 2025. And I think the big difference between AAA and Major League pitching, aside from just sheer velocity and bite, is they also have more time to play the chess game because they already have everything down mechanically. Like, he's seeing so many more finished products in big league spring training, and they're tuning up like what they've been doing for the last decade or so. Versus guys in AAA, it's like, okay, what do I need to do personally to get to the big leagues and be a major league caliber pitcher? So again, to your point, they're working on things versus in Major League Baseball, they know they get paid by getting guys out. And how do you get guys out? You attack weaknesses. So they are becoming grandmasters in chess versus AAA, AA, single A arms are trying to figure out how to play chess. Like, that's really, really tough. And it's resulted in 6 for 36 with 15 punch outs so far in spring training. It started really poorly. It's gotten a little bit better in the back half of spring training. A lot of people were clamoring for him to be the opening day second baseman. Give him a month in Worcester. And if he's hitting 330 with a 1,000 OPS again in Worcester, then you make the move for sure. But like, buy him some time to figure out how to play chess.
That, and also how about the defense too, right? This is somebody that has the athleticism to be a good defender, but is still trying to find a home. Second base looks like it's average. They're trying him in the outfield. That's not average yet. Maybe
you have to learn. Yeah, you got to learn how to be average, especially in a weird outfield like Boston, where center you're dealing with the triangle, right you're dealing with the pen, left you're dealing with the monster. Obviously, like, this is hard.
Yep. So, and that's the WAR calculation here, where it's okay. He's at best probably going to be a net neutral defensively. You're going to get some value on the base paths. But this guy's going to have to really slug to get to 3-4 WAR. Yeah. I think he can do that. But we talked about it. There's going to be some challenges hit tool-wise to get there. So that's the other side of it is you can get excited about the numbers and things like that. But even if he's putting up above average offensive numbers, how does he get to 3-4 WAR? And these rankings are kind of based on WAR accumulation through those 6 years of team control. That's where I can see Campbell being a little bit more challenged. That said, the upside still here is second baseman who could potentially play some outfield. He can hit 25 homers. Maybe, in really good years where he's locked in, maybe he can push to 30. The big aspect here is how many walks can he draw? Because I don't think he's going to hit for a ton of average. So if he can draw those walks, take some pressure off the hit tool, and slug as much as we think he can slug, it's still a really solid player. I just don't see that clear-cut top 10 prospect that I guess others do see.
Gotcha.
35, Chase Burns. Man, he's had some electrifying spring training outings already, huh?
Yeah.
It's been cool just really the one where we saw one inning, he sat 100, struck out the side. And just all of the buzz around him is that he looks as good as ever. That's exciting to hear if you're a Reds fan, because all of a sudden this team they're like 7 deep. We were talking about Rhett Lowder. There's a chance Chase Burns could be up there by midseason, and there's a good chance Chase Petty's the first man up. if they need somebody else to plug into that rotation. What we've talked about is fastball shape. Technically, it grades out really well. I think the Stuff Plus models love it because he gets so much vert. And the challenge is it's an over-the-top release that hitters just seem to recognize pretty well. Yeah. It's going to be similar to that Sasaki conversation, I think, where at 99, it's going to be a plus pitch. At 97, it might get hit a little bit. It got hit in college. And if a fastball gets hit in college, it's probably going to get hit in the professional ranks unless you make some adjustments. Location, things like that. We talked about it. We've seen it work with Hunter Green and developing there. But what's undisputable is that his breaking ball is one of the best in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
It's a 70 slider. And it is absolutely disgusting. And I'll mix in a curveball. I can blend with it, but that can be an above average pitch as well. That elevates his fork significantly, even if the fastball gets hit here and there.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me. Like I'm just looking at induced vert on his four-seamer, and I'm looking at Hunter Green actually. So 2022, when his four-seamer didn't perform that well, it was 16 inches of vert. It was 15 inches last year, and then it was 16 and a half inches. So it was correction. It was 16 in 22. In 23, it was 15, and in 24, it was 16 and a half. So by vert, things didn't really change much for Hunter Green. And I do think like that is the clear-cut comp for Chase Burns, and it helps being in the organization, in the same organization. But just looking at sheer results against the Hunter Green four-seamer, Hunter Green sat 98.9 in 2022, and opponents slugged .516 against his four-seamer. He sat 98.3 in 2023, and opponents slugged .518 against his four-seamer. He sits 97.6 in 2024, and opponents slugged .273. Okay, so velo got lower. Vert pretty much stayed the same. What changed? It's execution for Hunter Green. Like he wasn't leaving it middle. And if Chase Burns is committed to executing the fastball and the slider just ripping it into oblivion, if he's putting his fastball on a dot, I mean, this guy could be. Obviously, it's not the Skeens conversation. I think a lot of people beginning the year at Wake Forest last year wanted to clump Chase Burns in with Skeens. Like, oh, he could be this year's version of Paul Skeens. He's on his own planet, Skeens is. But, why can't this guy just be the next, big college pitcher? Why can't he be the next Hunter Green?
Yeah, and just be a guy that flies through and can get up and help you at the big league level very quickly. I have little doubt that he could be that. And what was interesting, and it's small sample, but in his spring training debut is he killed even more horizontal. So it was that, I think it really emphasizing that ride where he was getting maybe 18, 19 vert and only one or two horizontal. So that's really going to emphasize that vert. And for an over-the-top release, I think that may actually be more beneficial than cutting it ever so slightly where it just seems like you can get on plane for hitters a little bit more easily from that over-the-top 6.5 release. So we'll see if maybe that's something that it extrapolates and ends up helping him some. Yeah. But regardless, as long as he hits his spots, as you said, and I think a lot of it was tugging it back over the middle rather than true shape liability.
You can leave anything middle. Like exactly. A guy can be throwing a 25-inch fastball, and if it's over the heart of the plate and he tugs it down, that's going to deplete enough for a guy to hit it. That's the sometimes misconception. Like a Brian Wu, he'll get away with a middle fastball because he's an outlier, weirdo, freakazoid thrower. Even a Bryce Miller will get away with it a little bit more. But the guys that are kind of straight over the top like that, location's going to matter, even if you are a crazy vert guy. And I think Nick Pivetta is a great example of that as well. When Pivetta's on, it's dominance. But we've seen Nick on the top of the zone.
Yep. And then everything tunnels off of that. But we've seen Pivetta also struggle. He somehow ended up with a 4 ERA last year, which is crazy because when I checked in, it was like a 2 at early in the season.
That's the thing, man. This guy has a career 4.76 ERA. Like, you would think the way we've talked about Pivetta over the last 4 years or so, it's like, oh, vert machine on the fastball. 4.53, 4.56, 4.04, 4.14. Hasn't given us a sub-4 ERA, but he's got a great fastball. It's fastball execution.
And that guy still turned down a QO and got paid more. So it's amazing. 34. Talk about prospects that are going to be ranked in tandem pretty frequently. That's probably going to be the case with these two, but they'll probably graduate a lot quicker than Mayer and Lawlar. So Hagen Smith checks in at 34. I'm excited to just see and I know that it's not really a competition between these guys, but I'm just excited to see who separates themselves, if either, and just what it looks like from both of them in this first pro season. Hagen Smith has just, since the draft, had the slight edge for me because I think his margin for error is a little bit wider. And that's similar to what we just talked about. Hagen Smith can get away with more middle fastballs because his release is so unique and because it just seems to get on hitters so quickly and they just struggle to get to it. Then the slider off of that. I think the only slider that was close to Chase Burns's was Hagen Smith. And from a performance perspective, it was pretty ridiculous last year. And you also have Smith working on a changeup a little bit more now and starting to try to find a more consistent feel for that. There's been conversation about some other pitches that he's been kind of tinkering with, a slower curve. We'll see if a cutter gets mixed in there a bit more. That's the part that I'm really excited about because the White Sox do have the template with both Crochet, Rodon, even as a guy that developed well with them. So it'll be interesting to see. And I do believe that if there's one thing that the White Sox are going to do well, it's going to be led by Brian Bannister and actually developing some of these arms. But with Smith, the fastball slider combination pretty much ensures that he is a closer type arm, that he's a Tanner Scott type arm, I think. But I have a lot of confidence in his ability to be a middle rotation starter, even off of just those two pitches with a taste-breaking third, because the whiff numbers are so ridiculous with both.
You know what game I loved keeping tabs on was the spring breakout game between the Rockies and the White Sox, because that thing got off to an amazing pitching start. And just starting with the White Sox, like, how can you not be fired up that Hagen Smith started, Schultz followed? Smith went 2 hitless, and then Schultz went 2 perfect. They faced 1 over the minimum through the front 4. And then on the other side, Gabriel Hughes 2 perfect with 2 Ks, and then Brody Brecht with a perfect third with 2 Ks. And Jaden Hill, meanwhile, struck out the side in order in his inning out of the bullpen too. So like that was really fun. Rockies Hive stand up, and then the White Sox too. They saw that promise there. Unfortunately, Chase Mydroth 0 for 3, no walks, washed. But I mean, dude, those two in tandem, like, you know, you want to talk a lot about guys that are together, you know, each step of the way. I think the White Sox have this amazing opportunity here to have Smith and Schultz together in AA. Maybe they go to AAA for a minute, and you call them up the same day in June, and Schultz gets one day, Smith gets the next. I mean, these guys can be best friends doing karate in the garage, dude. It's going to be awesome.
I'll see you in Charlotte if that's the case too.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be there for maybe weeks at a time if that's going on. But it will at some point this coming season. And Smith just feels like a guy that can be fast-tracked pretty quickly. What I like is he can get to the big leagues with those 2 pitches and continue to try to develop that third even at the big league level, because he's going to get outs with those 2. It's really just a matter, though, of finding that third offering that can be consistent enough just to sprinkle in there. But a reminder, opponents hit 150 against him last year and had an in-zone whiff rate of 41% against his fastball. It is just really difficult to pick up out of his hand. It gets on hitters quickly. And whether you're a lefty or a righty, you're just going to struggle to get the barrel to it.
Yeah.
33, Coby Mayo of the Baltimore Orioles. Mayo, it's a little bit of a prospect fatigue conversation here. I still really do believe in him. But I think the area where it ended up having him slip a little bit was the defense maybe not being as good as I thought. And no one ever thought it was going to be good, but I thought it had progressed enough to where he could be maybe an average defender at third. And I'm not totally ruling that out yet, but he definitely looked sped up at the big league level. I do think that the struggles offensively spilled into that. But the problem is he's not very comfortable at first base yet either. So he doesn't have that fallback yet until he's going to get a lot more reps there. I'm sure he can much more easily progress into a solid first baseman. But the hope is that he can develop into a passable third baseman. And I'm still a believer of him being able to at least be like a 40, 45 grade defender there. But at this point, it was a little bit shakier than we thought. And then, of course, the big league debut was not good. He was overwhelmed, but he didn't really get a fair shot. And with such a long anticipated debut and one that I know folks had felt like, and himself included, that he probably
5 months overdue
a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
It just felt like he was pressing.
For sure, and I wonder when he's going to feel like he isn't pressing. And to be honest, like I don't see the roster being conducive to him being on it, quite frankly. Like
Yeah.
I think if you're going to get everyday ABs for Basayo, like it probably looks like he is either DHing or playing first base. And I think Mayo, like it would be playing first, but at third, you've got just better options here. And you're looking at an everyday infield of Westberg at third, Gunnar at short, Holiday at second. If Mayo's not seeing 80% first base reps, I don't really understand what the Orioles are doing if he goes to AAA to start the year. I also think he could net them a frontline starting pitcher. So when you talk about, like, I don't know, just trade assets in the minor leagues, I think Coby Mayo and Owen Casey are kind of the two clear cut. Like, this guy can get you a legit starting pitcher or a legit closer if you want that. So I'm fascinated to see how Baltimore handles Coby Mayo, but I think if they're not running him out at first pretty much every day in Norfolk to start the year, they don't really see him as part of the immediate future plans.
And that's another weird one where it's like, okay, well, then he's just going to hang out in AAA where he's going to rake. And that's the thing is, I think people are looking at the struggles at the big league level and conflating that with just an overall down year.
No,
it wasn't. He was great again in AAA.
He was amazing. 89.
That's why I'm not going to sound the alarms on this guy. Like if he was struggling in AAA, I'd say, okay, he played 93 games there. He had a 964 OPS. He struck out 25% of the time. He hit 25 home runs.
Yeah.
Like that's a 40 home run pace.
Yeah.
He was fine.
Yeah.
He just hasn't had the runway. And this is a guy that's going to take some time at the big league level, I think, to get comfortable. He loves to pull the ball hard in the air. He's a guy that I think when he's out of sorts, he's got to get back into rhythm and lock back in on the approach. And he's going to have stretches where he punches out 3 times, 4 times in a game. But he's also going to have stretches where he homers 6 times in 10 games. So that's a guy that needs to play 100 games before you really assess his ability to perform at the big league level. And to your point, I don't see that opportunity for him barring injury. And I think sending him to AAA, he's going to have a 950 OPS again, maybe better than that.
Yeah.
Then maybe you dangle him finally to a place where he will instantly be one of the middle of the order bats in a piece of the future. And he can net you that frontline starter that you need since Corbin Burns left.
Yeah.
We're going to get to 32, which is Quinn Mathews of the Cardinals here in a moment. Before that, our first break. All right, 32, Quinn Mathews, one of the most said names on this podcast in the last 365 days. And that's because he has been fantastic and was arguably the breakout pitcher last year. It's been more of the same in just the one outing we were able to see, but then spring breakout, I thought looked pretty good. It's just in those settings, I just expect him to dominate, to be honest.
Yeah.
All he has to prove this year after what he did last year, where he showed an above average, really plus fastball, I think, pretty close to plus fastball, plus slider, plus changeup, is can he prove that AAA was just him running out of gas, which I 100% think it was.
I 102% think it was that.
So that's really all it is okay, can you hone in AAA and do what you were doing in AA and everywhere else where opponents hit 180 against you overall in the season, where you filled up the zone and you struck out more than 35% of batters. Not only did his fastball jump to the mid-90s, he was getting above average vert. The slider became a disgusting pitch, and the changeup has always been a plus pitch for him, and now it's even better because it works off of a fastball that is now 13.5 miles per hour harder than it. So he's in a great spot. There's few pitchers that have a higher floor than him, I think, in minor league baseball. And I expect him to be up as soon as the Cardinals want to stop giving innings to Steven Matz, Miles Michaelis, and others. Yeah,
we'll see what happens. I do think him and actually the next guy that we're going to talk about are a near identical situation. They just need to prove that AAA struggles were not, we're nothing more than just fatigue. And I think that both of them experiencing career high in innings, it was probably just fatigue. And now
with an uptick. So it's like, all right, you're over 100 innings. How's it going to look after this?
Mathews, I loved watching his 3 innings in spring breakout, and he's just so under control in his delivery. You see a guy that used to throw 89, and then he just, decided to find 94, 95, and it came out of the back pocket. Nothing in terms of the delivery has changed. It is not max effort from him. It seems like it's an easy 94, 95.
It just looks like a guy that figured out how to tap into that 6'5" athletic frame a little bit more.
And started squatting. Yeah. Power cleaning.
But you still have that pitchability, upper 80s, low 90, 91 mile an hour guy that was able to still get himself drafted out of Stanford despite not having major league stuff at the time. Yep. So that's always the best candidates is the guys that had the pitchability and then the stuff jumps. And I mean, the floor just feels like a 4 with him at this point. But I think with the fastball potentially pushing towards plus with better execution, the slider and the changeup being plus, the taste-breaking curveball, he could be a 2 if it all fully comes together.
Absolutely a 2.
Another guy that could be a 2, but also I think has a lot lower of a floor, as you alluded to, similar AAA struggles, Brandon Sproat of the New York Mets. I mean, when he's on, it's as nasty as anybody in minor league baseball, where you have a crazy pitch mix. You have a fastball that can touch 102, but he settles more in the 97, 98 range. Pretty decent characteristics to it now, where it used to be more dead zone-ish. Now it's not. And that helped a lot, where the fastball performed quite well. Opponents only hit 220 against it last year. What I really like and what stood out to me with Sproat, and I've continued to talk about this, is the changeup that he found. And it's moves pretty similarly to the Paul Skeens Splinker. It's nothing's going to be as good as Paul Skeens Splinker from that release at 92, 93. But Sproat at 89, it's like if you have a Splinker light, that's going to be a really good pitch. And then he's got the sweeper. He's got that looked like a wipeout pitch that he just didn't throw a ton because he didn't land it as much as he wanted to. And then a cutter as well. It's an interesting pitch mix that I do think can be quite dominant. And it just comes down to consistency and command.
Yeah. I'm with you. Like when it's on, I get a little careless and I'm like, why can't he be an ace in Major League Baseball? Like it does look like ace type stuff when he's on. And he had an outing in spring training in Port St. Lucie where it sounded like a cannonball when it was popping the catcher's mitt. I was floored by not the life on the fastball, but just like how unbelievably hard it was. And the fact that he pairs that with a bunch of different options. If he ticks to a 50 grade command, like I do feel like he and Christian Scott are the future of that Mets rotation.
Oh, yeah.
Senga, they've got for 2 more years. But aside from that, I mean, at this point last year, we were talking about this trio of Vassell, Tidwell, and Hamill. And it's like, oh, who's going to jump out and be a starter? And then all of a sudden you see Christian Scott for a little bit. Now he's coming back from that hybrid surgery, but Sproat out of nowhere jumped in and looks like he is the future face of Mets pitching.
Another guy that blends the ground ball. It's not quite to the Susana degree, but ground ball rate north of 50%, strikeout rate north of 28%. That I don't have it in front of me, but I know that there's not going to be a ton of pitchers that did that in the minor leagues last year either. Yeah. It won't be by himself, obviously, but there's not a ton that have done that. If the command gets to where it can be, the fastball command was great last year, and that's the really encouraging part. 71% strike rate there. Everything else, not quite as high. 60% strike rate on the rest of his offerings. If that can get closer to 65, I got no doubt that he can be a middle rotation starter. And I think there's a little bit more room for upside. I just think the volatility will probably put him in that middle rotation range. Yep. Number 30, Bryce Eldridge, San Francisco Giants prospect who, I mean, you got to put the 25 ETA on him at this point because that's clearly what the Giants are telling us. I think that's insanely aggressive. I would like to see him spend a fair amount of time in AAA. I thought it was kind of crazy how quickly they pushed him there. But it is also a testament to how advanced of a hitter he is for a 6'7", 220-pound prepster who was a two-way guy after he heard his name called. They scrapped it once they realized how quickly he could ascend as a hitter. And as he focused on hitting last year, he was able to climb up every single level that there is to climb. He started in low A. He was in low A as late as June 26th and finished the season in triple A plus the fall league. So that is a little bit of a testament to how aggressive the Giants were, but also to how impressive Eldridge was, who really didn't blink in double A. And after just, what was it, a dozen games there, they said get to triple A. Part of that was probably just because they wanted to get him more games in general. I do wonder where they're going to ultimately assign him to. I'd imagine still triple A. But what a year it was for him. Guy that hits the ball hard consistently. Yeah. And I think that's what they love. He's going to whiff. He might strike out 30% of the time. Yeah. But a hard hit rate of 56% last year. It's not just the 90th percentile being 107. I think the average EV and the hard hit rate's more impressive. How frequently he's getting the 95 pluses is crazy in what was his age 19 season.
What do you think the conversation was around Bryce Eldridge when it came to like all those quick promotions after low A? So he was in low A for a while, and then it was like, okay, let's push him. Wait, he's not challenged. Let's push him. Wait, he's not challenged. Let's push him. Like that. I'm just thinking about every other week, someone popped into Buster Posey's office and was just like, what do we do with Eldridge? Like he's mashing, and Posey's like, F it, push him harder.
Push him again.
Yeah, push him again. Keep pushing. At some point he's going to get up, and it's just so funny that like this guy, and now I think player development in general now is more willing to see a guy get up to the bigs quicker. Like we don't have to wait until he's 22 years old to see him. I mean, this guy's already, he's nowhere close to a finished product, but like you can finish at the major league level with a major league coaching staff.
Especially if you shelter him from lefties. That strikeout rate drops to 25%.
And it's way easier to convince a Major League Baseball team to shelter a guy from lefties than righties.
Especially the Giants, who love to platoon. Against righties, 315, 398, 575 slash line last year, and 973 OPS, 12% walk rate, 25% K rate. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah, really good.
So that's where I think he gets up. You shelter him from lefties. You eventually want him to become this more complete hitter, but if you want to rush him up to the big leagues in a team that clearly wants to compete now with the signings that they made, Willy Adames doesn't tell me we're building for 2030. I know he signed until then, but that tells me, hey, we want to make a little bit more noise now. Justin Verlander doesn't tell me that we're building for 2030 either.
You don't think so? Isn't he still pre-arb, Verlander?
Yeah, I think he'll be in the Hall of Fame in 2030, or 2032 essentially. But he looked good the other day, by the way, Verlander. Good spring training.
Look good too. Both these guys, man, turning back the clock
would be awesome. But with Eldridge, who's half his age, by the way, I what do you think? July, June, if he's playing well?
All-Star break.
Yeah.
Mid-July.
It'll be a test. And if he struggles, please don't change your assessment on him. He's getting thrown into the fire. And I don't hate it. Yeah. If it works, you can use that power in San Francisco any day, because that's a guy that won't be fazed by the ballpark. But the whiff may creep in there a little bit.
Yep.
Number 29. Another guy that we should see quite early and who hits the living crap out of the ball. Jac Caglianone. The spring training performance, he just got optioned back to minor league camp. I think ultimately it's just because they want him to extrapolate on what was a phenomenal spring training. The fall league was where it started to come together, in my opinion, where we talked about it. He started to chase less. He was controlling his ABs a lot better. And the results were there as down the stretch of the fall league, where I think over his last 15 games, he had a 916 OPS. He walked nearly as much as he struck out. That's the well, not that. I mean, I'd expect him to strike out, but Caglianone walking is what you want to see. He's feared. Right? He's a guy that you want to pitch around, especially though when you know that he's going to expand. So him being able to cut down the chase, even if it was for a small sample, was very encouraging. And then to continue to do that in spring training just only helps that idea. Now, it's 13 games here in spring training, but he was 9 for 17 it's pretty outrageous. And I think it's been made very clear to him, hey, Cags, the only thing holding you back from the major leagues right now is your approach.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty easy thing to hone in on when you have 80 grade power and your feel to hit is about as good as anybody I've seen that has 80 grade power. Yeah. I continue to emphasize that the hit tool gets conflated with the plate discipline, and people say, oh, he's got a lot of swing and miss. Not really. The contact rates have consistently been good. It's the approach that continue to undermine that. And if he's shoring that up, what's the ceiling, Jack?
There is none. If he pitches to the ceiling, Shohei Ohtani. No, there is no ceiling. The ceiling is 50 to 55 homers. Like, why can't this guy hit 50 homers in a major league season? Especially when he can like miss-hit balls out because he's a huge human being. He's 6'5", 250, man. And like, there's no wasted weight on that 6'5" frame. If he can miss-hit baseballs out and he has this knack for getting the barrel to anything, swing decisions and him not producing any soft contact could give him 50 homers. Yeah. And that spring training you mentioned, it was 9 for 17. He walked 5 times. He K'd 3 times. Yeah. Like those are the 2 numbers that jump out to me. Obviously the 3 homers jump out. Obviously the 9 hits jump out and 17 ABs, but 3 Ks compared to 5 walks. Like, that is the thing that everybody's searching for. JJ Piccolo is fired up about it. And, Quintero is fired up about it. Like, I mean, this guy, like, my only question is double or triple A to start the year. I think double, and then maybe go to Omaha after a month.
I would be, it's funny because I go back and forth. Part of me says double, but I just think he might just feast there. Whereas triple is going to be the area where the approach would do you in a little bit more.
So counterpoint, he didn't show them that he feasted in high A.
I know. But is this a different hitter now all of a sudden?
So maybe, but like, he's also got to prove it over the course of a regular season.
Yeah. So probably the Texas League, and then quick bump if he balls out, which I presume he will. It's not just the numbers and the batted ball data, which is outrageous, by the way.
Yeah.
It's who he was doing it against. Backside double off of Hunter Green on a 99-mile-an-hour fastball, and then right after that, he smacked a single the other way, too, on a 100-mile-per-hour Hunter Green fastball as well. He took Aaron Savali 115, 444. It's just ridiculous stuff here where, he's the one guy that we're going to talk about here that can really hit 50. I think Eldridge can hit 40. Cags can hit 50 because his margin for error is so wide where he can, as you mentioned, miss hit balls that get out. And I can't really think about a prospect that just raw power wise can do the things that Cags does. O'Neal Cruz would probably be the other, but
that's about it.
Cags has a better feel to hit than O'Neal Cruz.
Yeah.
28, Marcelo Mayer, another Boston Red Sox prospect. And people thought that this was low. This was another one. Maybe it's just Red Sox fans. He's the 28th ranked prospect, and he's been hurt back-to-back years. Did a lot of things well last year that elevated his prospect status, though, because I still do have some concerns, but they were more significant in the swing and miss department. He added bat speed, and as a lot of guys have in that Red Sox system.
Yeah.
And the 90th percentile jumped to 106. The hard hit rate jumped to 50%. The concern is the discrepancy between fastball and everything else.
Yeah.
Where against fastballs, he slashed 370, 425, 572, just near 1,000 OPS.
Yeah.
And then against everything else, he slashed 205, 275, 297. That's where I get a little concerned because when you watch the swing, it looks like swing and miss is going to be part of his game. And I know he didn't strike out a ton last year, and I know he hit for a decently high average. That's because he hit the living crap out of the ball. But I do think that the hit tool is going to be fringy at the big league level. The encouraging part is now that he's added plus raw power that I do think will translate into above average game power eventually, and he's at least an average, probably above average defender at shortstop. Even if he's a 230, 240 hitter, he's going to be able to accumulate WAR pretty easily by playing above average short and running into 20 to 25 home runs if he's able to walk. And the approach took a big step forward last year as well.
The benefit is that this guy's a well-rounded player. The downside is the offensive profile as high as the defensive profile when you think about a well-rounded player. So, like, what I mean by that is he can be fine offensively. He can be good defensively. He can be good on the base paths. So we're talking about a guy that's a good shortstop, like a good major league shortstop, but he's not an all-star shortstop, which is what limits him from being a top 20 prospect in baseball. But like,
yeah,
a good MLB shortstop is absolutely the 28th ranked prospect in baseball.
Yeah. And probably higher had he not been hurt in back-to-back seasons.
He's been hurt a lot.
And it was like a list of ailments. It wasn't just one thing.
Yeah.
Last year, it was a few different things. And I think just kind of keeping up with, I know the Red Sox have been a lot more on top of it, how their prospects' bodies are responding to things, even using tracking to do that and technology to do that. And I'm pretty sure Mayer just was not feeling great, and multiple ailments were affecting him, like back and shoulder and this and that. And it's back-to-back years of that now. So that is part of it too, because this is a guy that I think is valuable over 150, 160, where you're accumulating above average defensive runs saved. You're running into 20 to 25 home runs, and you're just available as an above average shortstop every day. An above average shortstop that plays 100 games for you is now average, because that's a below average amount of games. So that's the important thing here. And that's the thing that he's going to need to showcase. But he took a huge step forward last year, I think, in the power department and even in the hit tool department. If he hammers fastballs and mistake breaking balls and plays good defense, he's going to have a long career. And health is really the only thing that I think kept him out of the top 20 on top of the other things. But I think the other things still wouldn't have been enough to keep him out of there. The injuries back-to-back years is what kept him just out of the top 20.
Gotcha.
Speaking of injuries, we're going to get to a guy who's coming back from one in a moment here. Before that, quick break. 27 is Jeferson Quero. Comes back from a shoulder issue and should start the year in AAA, where he was going to start the year, where he did start the year last year before getting hurt basically in the first game. This guy is a special catcher. Defensively, I mean, it's borderline plus. Offensively, you have above average field to hit and above average power potential. Challenge is the approach is not great, and that limits him some. I don't necessarily care when it's a catcher as much, because he can run into 20 to 25. And you know that he's got the bat to ball to do that. If it comes with a low OBP, whatever, because he's playing plus defense potentially, or at least plus. Yeah. He is exactly what you want in a catcher. And it's Real Muto-ish. It is. It's just a matter of, like, can he get to all of those tools to the degree that JT did and has for such a long time? But he's got that in him. That's the ceiling, I think.
I'm curious about that ceiling because, like, okay, you've got 65 grade defender. That's totally JT. The one that jumps out to me is the plate discipline. And I know JT is not a guy that's going to walk all the time.
No.
Like, is it to a level where it might do him in early or no?
Maybe to a degree, but this is my thing is I look at like JT Real Muto's, and it might be a little bit lighter than this because Real Muto I think bat to ball wise, it's pretty underrated how consistent he is and has been in that regard. But
Happy
you look
birthday,
at,
by the way, JT's 34th birthday today. Happy birthday.
No way.
Yeah.
It's so funny how that happens. You look at, like, let's say the 2017 season. He had 278, 330 OBP, but he only walked 6% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, if it's a little bit less than that, 17 home runs with plus defense, that was a 4.5 WAR season. Like, I think Quero has the defensive ability that Real Muto has. So if it comes with a little bit less hit, and I think probably a little bit more raw power, it's not far-fetched to me that he could get there. JT, probably a little bit more polished, and the bat to ball helps him in that regard. But we're talking about a super athletic catcher who can run into 20 to 25, and the contact rates have been good for him. And we'll see how it is off of injury and everything. But in 2023, I mean, he ran an in zone contact rate of 85% and an overall contact rate of 77%. That's more than fine. So the chase rate was 35. That's going to be the thing to monitor. But if he can cut that down a little bit more, that's the one thing that, I could do him into a degree, but as a catcher, I'm not as worried about it. Because if he's getting on base at a 320 clip, whatever. He's still going to be getting 3-4 WAR.
I'll throw you another one. Could this just be getting ahead of Yainer Diaz? Like, could this just look like Yainer Diaz?
Better defensively, though. So I'd say less hit, slightly better approach, better defense.
Cool. I'll take that.
Yeah. That's again, still a really good player. I just feel like the floor is so high. And he's another guy, if he wasn't hurt last year, probably top 15. Yeah. It's just, we got to wait and see how he comes back off of a pretty significant labrum issue with it happening on a swing. He's 22 still. It was so ahead of schedule. So it's going to be 22 in AAA. And we're throwing out outcomes here. Ceiling is Real Muto, but I feel like a really good chance of being some iteration of like Gabby Moreno or
awesome.
like those types of guys. I think Moreno with a little bit more power and a little less hit, but the defensive ability. Like, there's a lot of good catchers in the major leagues that Quero checks the same boxes as.
Cool.
Just excited to see a healthy Quero. 26, JJ Wetherholt of the St. Louis Cardinals, and hoping to get a look at him in the backfields one of these days over the next week or so. But every time I watch this guy, and I got to see him in spring training the other day as well, he controls his at-bats so well. And we've talked about just how crazy it is that he fell to the Cardinals at the 7th pick in the 2024 draft. But he's so tough to punch out because he's a phenomenal feel for the strike zone. He can get to a lot of pitches within the strike zone, and he can spoil pitches outside of them. Then you look at the power. It's frame defying, where he will go backside. He can hit the ball in the air to all fields. I'd like to see him pull the ball in the air a little bit more, and that's probably the one area where he's a little deficient. But he could still make a living. It'll just limit the power output some. Hitting the ball hard in the air, straight back up the middle into the backside. Where I'm a little bit skeptical with the more I've been able to see is him playing shortstop. I just don't know. There's not necessarily a need for that with Mason Wynn, I think, potentially blossoming into a plus defender there. I think Weatherholt's best spot is still second base.
Yeah.
But offensively, with above average speed, above average power, plus hit and plus plate discipline, or even if it stalls out at average power, that's going to be that's the upside of one of the better second basemen in the game.
Will that be when they move off of the Gormanator? Is when Weatherholt's ready?
They may move off of him before Weatherholt's even ready.
His 37.5% K rate last year. Wetherholt, I've seen a decent bit of JJ actually this spring, and he looks like he can play shortstop. But again, like, I'm with you. I think it would probably be best if he played second. He did not look good in terms of the batting average department in spring training. Like, he was 2 for 20 this spring, but he walked more than he struck out still. Like, he was 6 walks and 5 Ks. So I'm with you. Like, this is a guy that had no business being awesome in big league spring training, and he wasn't, but it still resulted in OBP kind of salvaging the slash line. Yeah. And I'm all for that. His first swing, I think, of spring training, or at least his first game in spring training, was that 3-run homer. And after that, it was like really no offensive production at all. But that's okay because he's playing half the game. He's going to go to Peoria. Like, he was really good in low A last year, and an 805 OPS. You may not think he was really good, but that's a guy that missed a lot of time with a hamstring issue and is getting his first taste of professional baseball, and it looked awesome. So I'm excited to see what he can do in, I would assume, high A and double A this year.
He sprinted through the finish line last year too, where, I mean, the final 10 games, if you include the postseason, he had 20 knocks. So, I mean, it's a 465, 531, 721 slash line. He had 20 hits in his final 10 games and 6 extra base hits. And I mean, he's just going to keep hitting. So even if the power is average, he's going to be a really good second baseman for a long time. He's going to fly through the minor leagues even after what was a difficult spring. I think it's a good time to get that out of his system. Not really putting a ton of stock in that. 25, Chase Dollander. Dollander has been a buzzy name this spring, and understandably so. He has been really good. He had a little bit of a shaky outing against the Athletics, but then bounced right back against the Guardians and went 4 innings of 2 hit ball, no runs, 2 walks, 3 Ks. His fastball has been sitting 97.5 all spring. And that fastball, it's high spin, short arm release, high carry, just explodes through the zone. It's a 70 heater, and I think there's room for more velocity. The slider is disgusting. The changeup is flashed. The curveball is a fine fourth offering. It's just about the command for him and like consistency with the secondary command. But he can ride that fastball slider to plenty of success.
Freeland, Marquez, Feltner, Senzatella, Bradley Blaylock, or Chase Dollander for the 5th game of the season?
You know what my answer is, and we talked to Kevin Henry.
I think it might be Bill Schmidt's answer too.
I mean, Kevin Henry seems like he believes Dollander is going to have every opportunity. And I think with one more good start, because they'll have time to probably make, 2 more good starts?
Probably has 2 turns left.
Yeah, he should be pitching today as we're listening. Or as we're listening, as you're listening.
By the way, I just watched Jordan Walker hit an absolute missile out to left center field, but keep going.
I would love to see him have a great year. Yeah, I mean, he should be in the rotation. Why waste any more bullets in AA and you're going to send him to AAA? What's going to be the point of putting him in the PCL?
No point. It's either Hartford or he's starting the 5th game of the season for the Colorado Rockies.
The one nitpick I think that the Rockies could have is that the curveball has been there more for him this spring, and the changeup and the slider, it's a 53 pitch sample, but he's only landed them for a 42% strike rate. So like they haven't been there for him. That's just something that he hasn't really had all 4 there for him yet as a pro. If he does, I mean, you can see ace potential. It's just finding that consistency for all 4 offerings. It always seems like it's the fastball and then pick your secondary, whereas it hasn't been multiple secondaries. That's the last little piece for him. Yeah. 24, Leo De Vries of the San Diego Padres. And De Vries, I saw like a Dennis Lin piece that said De Vries could be up as soon as the end of this season or early next season. Please don't. Please don't do that, AJ Pro. He's 2 for 20 or 2 for 18 this spring, which I don't care about that, but it's just like a reminder that he's 18 for the entirety of this season. Let's let this kid develop.
Yep.
But in terms of the ability, switch hitter with above average power plus plate discipline, I think can stick at shortstop. It's a question of the hit tool progressing to the above average grade that I ultimately think it can be, but it's so hard to assess when you have a 17-year-old playing in full season ball.
Yep.
But I think the way that he was able to survive and what he did is a testament to what will ultimately be an above average hit tool. If it's above average hit, above average power, plus plate discipline, sticking it short, that's a potential all-star shortstop.
Hitter-friendly environment, yada, yada, yada. 11 homers in 75 games in your age 17 season. Come on, man. Like, and 13 for 15 in the stolen base department. Come on, man. Like, this guy having the ability to tap into homers as a 17-year-old off of the complex and having the feel on the base paths to swipe, granted 13's not, 30, but like 13 in 15 attempts and being that highly efficient. He's clearly mature beyond his years, but we've seen AJ Preller skew the development of a player that is mature beyond his years 365 days prior. So I'm worried he's going to get Padre'd. I really hope he doesn't get Padre'd. I think 2027 could be fair. 2025 or 2026 would be a joke.
It'd be reckless. And the injury at the end of the year stunk. You got to come back for the Arizona Fall League, which is great, but he was in the midst of really not fully putting it together, but really breaking out from an offensive sense, where final 35 games of the regular season before he went down, he was flashing 284, 407, 589. It's a 996 OPS, 16% walk rate, 18% K rate. 10 homers in that stretch, by the way. 10 homers in 35 games as a 17-year-old. In full season ball, and in that stretch, he ran a 15% chase rate. That is a potential monster here. Running plus EVs for his age and everything like that. He's also a candidate to be number 1 overall prospect in baseball if the Padres don't Padre him. And he takes that leap forward this coming season as well. Yeah. Another candidate. We're in that range. Jesus Mate. We'll see Jesus Mate in full season ball for the Brewers. They aggressively push their guys, but responsibly aggressive, right? I think that would be the way to describe the way the Brewers do it. They identify the guys that can move, and they move them, but in a more responsible manner. Mate is going to be in full season ball, and I think that's perfect. I think it would be a waste of his time to play at the complex with his plate discipline, because it's some of the most elite swing decisions we've seen in a long time at the lower levels. It's also just a guy that, as a switch hitter, has elite bat speed. And we saw the numbers that he put up in OPS well over 1,000 at the DSL, putting up batted ball data you just don't see from a 17-year-old. He was 16 at the start of the season. Hard hit rate of 47%, 90th percentile, 104 miles per hour as a switch hitting 17-year-old. This guy could be a superstar. I do want to encourage people to slow down a little bit. I know it's crazy because we have been, I think, on the front of the Jesus Mate hype train. He still needs to show that he can do it against full season stuff. And
but that's literally the only thing that he has to do. It's like it's a perfect profile, and the only thing that you can say is, let's see him do it against better competition. And I'm with you, like that's the most valid thing. Again, like second time I'm bringing up Skeens today, but like it's like the hold of poke and Skeens. It's a perfect profile. The only argument against him being the best pitcher in baseball is let's see him do it again.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's Jesus Mate right now.
For sure. And for what he's been able to play competition wise, he's so much better than everybody else. I get it. But there's also some components to the swing that could result in him being a little bit more challenged and have to make some slight tweaks as he plays in full season ball. He can get a little lungy, that he gets away with it because he's so freakishly quick and has some of the best hands I've seen from a hitter, especially at the lower levels. But just a reminder, like when you're really advanced and really quick and have this natural bat speed, you could just feast on DSL competition. 65% of the pitches he saw were fastballs that averaged 89.7 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what the DSL is. He's so much better than everybody else that I think he is clearly a top 30 prospect in the game and clearly ready for a low A challenge. But if he puts up a 110 WRC plus in low A, are people going to drop him on the rankings?
No,
I'd hope not, because he is a potential superstar. But when we get these kind of wonderkin players, I feel like we can get ahead of ourselves a little bit. He's still going to have this maturation and progress, and I'm excited for that. And I think this is still going to be a really good year for him because he's going to walk still. He's going to destroy fastballs, and the bat speed is so crazy. I think defensively, his long-term home is second base, and he could potentially be one of the most electrifying second basemen in the game if it all comes together.
Yeah.
Dare I say, the ceiling is kind of Ketel Marte-ish?
Yeah, but like Ketel doesn't play shortstop. Ketel Marte, it's short.
I said second base.
Yeah, but like, could he still play shortstop though?
I think second.
Okay, so yeah, Ketel Marte, that works.
I think long-term second base.
That works.
So Jack has a conversation with Connor Norby. So that I'm excited to hear on Marlins radio. We're going to cut it a little bit short here, and we're going to stop it at 22. That's a really good reason, though, I'd imagine. Listen to the Marlins radio broadcast, by the way. Just want to plug that really quickly. We'll start with Noah Schultz. We don't want to rush through him because he's really freaking good. And we'll go 22 all the way to 1. If it's a longer episode next time around, we're happy to do that. We're looking forward to doing that later this week. As always, thank you for listening. We look forward to talking prospects with you later this week.